the gospel of Jesus says that we don't work our way to heaven. Jesus has already worked our way to heaven by him dying on a cross.
Yep.
So when we think that we're going to work our way to being a man, we're going a direction that's counter to the gospel. We work for God, we do, but it comes from a place of, I'm already accepted. I'm loved. He's pleased with me. And I just had a relationship. I want to honor him.
Drawing from his own experience and the lives of others, Pastor Brian Tome calls on men to examine themselves, take step in the direction of fully realizing manhood that honors God, respects women, elevates others, and works purposefully for an end greater than their own satisfaction and pleasure. So the book is The 5 Marks of a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. And Pastor Brian, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, I am honored to be with you guys.
We're honored to have you. Now, this is a redo, like you already wrote this book and then rewrote it, right?
Yes, we wrote it. And what do you know? The book did really, really well. And so well that we thought, I'd like to get it, just make some tweaks to it. And so the publisher said, great, let's do a reworking of it, re-release. And so we rewrote some sections and polished some things up, and yeah, it's been going strong. It's been a lot of fun.
And there's also a workbook that goes along with the whole thing.
Yes, we have a workbook that comes along with it, and we've also got a devotional that comes out in several months.
So talk about the inspiration behind 5 Marks of a Man, and where'd this come from?
Well, the inspiration started with me because I was a boy. There's a difference between a man. There's a difference between a man and a boy, right? And there are 15-year-old men, and there's also 45-year-old boys. I know a bunch of both of them. And my journey was one of being a boy up until sometime in my 20s. And then when I had a son, when he came out of my wife, it was a pretty cool thing because I'm adopted. I was born at a very early age. And then I was
Okay.
Yes, I was. But I think most of us are born at an early age, right?
Yeah, that was a slow one for a while.
It was.
Yeah, we caught on those.
Getting you going today.
Yep.
And when my son was born, since I was adopted, he was only the second person in my life I'd ever seen who had my own DNA, who I shared DNA with. The first one was his older sister. So they took him out of my wife, brought him over to the changing table, put him on the changing table. I reached down to touch his hand. As soon as I did, he sent a stream of urine up in the air, hit me in the arm, dribbled all the way down to my hand. And I thought, yeah, this could be an omen of things to come. Because as a boy, I defecated all over my dad. I was a horrible son. My dad didn't have a car I didn't wreck. He didn't have a rule I didn't break. He didn't have any money around the house that I always stole it for poker games. I was just a wreck. And looking back on it, I realized what was taking place in the spiritual and emotional realm is I was trying to prove that I was a man. When a male tries to prove that he's a man, however he does it, by the things he purchases, the women he conquests, the academics he achieves, if he thinks those are the things they're going to make him meaningful, he's acting boyish. And I realized for my son, I needed to get him on a path that was different. And that started my research into men and what separates a man from a boy and how to bring somebody in manhood and all that stuff.
Go into that journey a little bit, just becoming a student of, of manhood and.
He was kind of describing me.
Yeah. Breaking every rule.
Yeah.
Yep. That's definitely Kinkle Fritz.
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Just
well,
those
his
patterns
parents
that
broke
you
the
saw
rule.
emerge. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so no, I was saying his parents broke the rule by giving him that name. That was
That's
wonderful.
true.
So I just started doing. I'm a big reader. I like history. I like biography, and I like the Bible. I like it a lot. So I started just reading these things and thinking about all the people I'd come to know, and in my life, like what was it about the men that I respect? What was it about the men that inspire me? What was it about the men that make a positive impact? And what do you know? who I saw in my own personal life were the same character qualities I saw of people in the Bible and of people in history. And there were 5 things, the things that separate a boy from a man. And that's where it went from there. And then from there was my son, trying to get him to a place where I could call him a man, declare man. Because until a young male is told by a father or father figure that you're a man in whom I'm pleased and you've done well, son, he'll keep trying to prove it, and he'll most likely be in an unhealthy way. You know, Jesus, he only hears from his father, God the Father, 3 times. At least that's what's recorded in the Bible. It could be more than 3, but only 3 times. That's it. And 2 of those times, it's the exact same thing. Like a lot of us are trying to go to God and, God, what car should I buy? Who's the person I should marry? What's the this? What's the that? We don't see Jesus ever talk with God about where he should go or what he should do. What we see instead is Jesus spoke with God about who he was. When God spoke to him 2 out of 3 times, he says this is my son who makes me happy. That's the best translation. My son who makes me happy. When a man believes he's operating from a place of strength, that who he is right now is worthy and I don't have to prove anything, that's the beginning of power. And that's what all ancient cultures have and ours doesn't have, which is why our young males are in such crisis today.
So is that the beginning of less bad behavior?
Yes. Yes.
Take
yes,
notes,
because
Finkel Fritz.
Yeah.
right. Well, you know, it's like the gospel of Jesus says that we don't work our way to heaven. Jesus has already worked our way to heaven by
Amen.
him dying on the cross.
Yep.
So when we think that we're going to work our way to being a man, we're going a direction that's counter to the gospel. We work for God, we do, but it comes from a place of I'm already accepted. I'm loved. He's pleased with me. And I just had a relationship. I want to honor him. It's the same thing for a man. We've got to feel as a man, I'm good the way I am right now. I am accepted by God. I don't have anything to prove. And then let's get it done. Then a man goes to work and starts having an impact. But it has to be from a place of stability.
Misty, you can answer that.
Hey, you really?
You are so bad.
No,
You are
that's
so
a
Call me
prime
Misty.
example of him misbehaving.
Call
That
me
was
Misty.
his phone.
Sorry.
It took me a second to realize what you were doing there.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
Oh, that's so
Yeah.
funny.
That's why we edit this stuff
I
out.
love what you're sharing here, having raised a son myself along with my husband. And just it was such a mystery to me because there were just 3 girls in our family, no boys. So my only experience was a grown-up boy, a man, my father. And so watching my son grow up under the leadership of my husband, I just say amen to what you put your heart into, the 5 marks of a man, and how important this is. You write, we're facing things that no other males in any corner of the globe in any time period have faced. Tell us, what do you mean by that? And maybe even some examples.
Well, first of all, let's make sure we understand how poorly men are doing. Men are not well. And for America, the last few decades, I think we've done a really good job as a country championing the causes of people who are getting left behind. Not that the problems are solved, but we've done a really good job in elevating the status of women, giving women opportunities. So I'm not saying the work is done, but and there's been a lot of work on, okay, what do we do with people who have a skin tone that's darker than mine, which is white? And we put a lot of energy into, making the races equal, fair treatment, all that stuff. And I think all of that's good, and we're not done with the work on all that. But what I'm saying, Sally, is if you look at people who are at risk, that would be the category of men today.
Wow.
And let me tell you why I say that. Men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide than women. 4 times more likely. Men, as opposed to women, men's life expectancy is going down. Women's are not. Men are 2 times more likely to have a to have a alcohol abuse or chemical abuse related incident than are women. Men are falling behind economically, and it's only going to get worse. Right now, 70% of all applicants or all students in graduate school are women. We know from the history of our country, those who are the best educated, generally speaking, get the most money. Simultaneously, while this is happening, men are detached from things that we've done in the past. We're no longer increasing numbers. The primary bread earners, by the way, as I go through these things, understand none of these things are inherently bad. It's not bad that 70% are women. It's not bad that women are making more. It's not bad when a woman makes more than her husband. I wish my wife made more than me. I'd buy more motorcycles. You know, there's nothing wrong. It's not bad when a husband decides to be the stay-at-home parent because his wife can make more money.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I'm saying, to your point, Sally, is these are all firsts in anthropological history. Never before in the history of the world have these factors and dynamics been at play within a culture and within a gender such as men. So right now, men are in sort of the in-between no man's land. Maybe at some point we'll pressurize these things. We won't be so destructive to ourselves and others, which again, maybe this is why I can't think of an active shooter who was ever a female, you know?
Yeah.
All these things, like, men are not well. And that's what I have a heart for. And I need to have more people seeing that men are in crisis here. We need to expand our compassion bucket to not just have compassion for some of the classic cases that need compassion, but also to say that, man, men are not well. And I'll tell you what, when men are not well, this does not go well for a culture. It is a horrible thing for a culture. Like my son, when he was born, I realized, oh my gosh, unlike my daughter, this is like when you have a son, the stakes are higher. When you have, for instance, when you have a Rottweiler as a puppy, you realize my training is going to be a lot different than the person who's got a Chihuahua. I mean, who cares if you train a Chihuahua, right? Because if Chihuahuas get out of control, they're not really going to hurt anybody. Although we all know Chihuahuas are basically the most vicious dog there is. They're always snarling. I've never met a nice Chihuahua.
Yeah,
I was gonna say, watch out, you're tromping on this.
Oh no! I agree. Like Chihuahuas are crazy.
Right. But it doesn't. No one writes an article about it because they really can't pose a danger. They're small.
Yeah.
When you have a Rottweiler, you have a German Shepherd,
Different
you have
story.
something like that. Oh my gosh! And that's what's like when you have a young male. He is a destruction machine. He is. He's got more muscle mass. He's going to likely have more muscle mass. He's going to have a different mentality. And I knew for my son, I needed to raise him right, or he could be a menace and danger. Now, you think about that for our culture. When you have the number of fatherless males that we have right now, when you have these social systems that have changed so rapidly, when you have young males in unprecedented numbers self-medicating with online gambling and betting on sports, which again, I'm not anti-gambling. I'm really not. But I am saying you got so many young males who are using this as an outlet now, and they're falling behind. Everyone says, oh, I win. I'm basically up. Oh, no, you're not. You're not up. You are losing money. That's why they advertise you all the time. What do you think is going to happen to a young male who already feels down on his luck, and now he's $100,000, $50,000, $10,000 in debt to betting? He even feels like that much more like a loser. He's going to do one of two things. He's going to harm himself, or he's going to harm others. Not good.
Yeah.
You said that age is not a differentiating factor between a man and a boy. So what is?
Correct. It's the characteristics. It's the characteristics with which you operate. And again, these characteristics are not the things that make you a man. They're the things that define that you have become a man. I can share this with you if you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 5 differences between a man and a boy. This is the genesis of my book, 5 Marks for Man. Is and they're not in any sequential order, but here they are. Number 1, a man has a vision, and a boy lives day to day. Boys wake up and they just want a nice day. That's all they want. A man, there's something out in the future that he doesn't have yet that he wants to have. It's going to take two things. It's going to take time and it's going to take effort. It's going to take difficulty. Boys don't want that. Don't want that at all. When I went to college, I got a 4-year degree that took me 7 years to get.
Oh, you were on the 7-year plan.
I was in the 7-year plan.
That's a good one.
Took accounting 1 3 times. And
Sally Mae
the
loves
reason, well, the reason I did is my parents enabled me. They paid for my college, and I took advantage of it as any boy would. And I didn't understand. No one, I shouldn't say no one told me. I just never internalized, hey, Brian, if you get a degree and get good grades, you'll have more opportunities and options, which could lead to more money to buy more toys or whatever it is. I didn't, because I didn't have a vision. I was a boy. So that's one of the things. Men have a vision, no matter what age they are. They got something they're working toward that's out in the future. Boys can't handle it. They just need a good day. Second thing, men work and boys play. A boy gets up every day, just wants to have fun and have a good time. I like to have a good time. I do a lot of pleasure activities. I like to hunt. I ride a motorcycle. I do a lot of things, but those things restore me so I can work. When Adam and Eve come onto the planet, they are working. Their days of purity, they're working. Work is not a curse. Fruitless work is a curse. And whenever a man starts planning his life because he wants to retire, whenever a man stops working, it's a bad sign. I'm not saying you should be in corporate America forever, because corporate America is eventually going to push you out. But working is adding value. Wherever I am, I'm adding value. Is it paid or volunteer? Men work, boys play. Third one is that men are protectors, boys are predators. Boys take. That was me. Take my parents' car, taking my parents' money. Just take. Men protect. We see the vulnerable. We protect them. When we're dating a woman, a boy will say, well, she said I could do X, Y, Z sexually. Okay, fine. But a man doesn't think that way. He thinks, well, she may be saying that, but I want to protect her future if she doesn't get married to me to another husband. I want to protect my future wife if this one ends up not being my wife. And I'm going to choose to not have sex with her because I want to protect the future dream. A man has savings. He doesn't have savings because he who has the most money wins. Many boys are billionaires. They think that the money is their manhood. It's not. Men have money so they can protect. I have savings so I can pay for other people's bills. I have savings so I can take care of things that I can't see coming. That's part of what money is for me. I protect. Number 4, men take up a minority position, and boys always have to be in the majority. Excuse me. But boys always have to be in the majority. Boys are like they're like pigeons. They come in, they squawk, they make a loud noise, and they leave poop all over the place. They leave immediately, right? Men, there's not a lot of us. We're always in the minority. If I support you as a political candidate, that's a bad thing because you're going to lose. Because my views are in the minority. Now, they happen to be the Bible's views. Yeah. But they're in the minority. And men are okay with that. We're okay standing alone and being in the minority. In Cincinnati, we solved our pigeon problem because a few peregrine falcons were introduced to the wildlife. And they devastated, they crush them. They take out the boys, or take out the pigeons, just crush them. You can still see these pigeons. It's wonderful. That's the way men are. It doesn't take a lot of us. We have way more power than a boy. When a man walks into the room, you know it. When a man says something versus a boy could say the same thing, but a man says something because it's got the weight of a life well lived, you stop. You're like, doesn't matter. It's a minority. There's some credence coming from a powerful figure. Right. Yeah. 100%. And then lastly, and we can go back on all these and look at them more if you'd like. Lastly, is a man is a team player and a boy wants to be MVP. Boys want it to be all about themselves. They want to be all-time quarterback in the backyard. Men are about being with others, which this is, and being linked with others. This is the whole story of Jesus. He's in a team with 12 disciples. God exists in a team, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. He works through the team called the nation of Israel, the church. Men, when we're at our best, are team players. And I think it's ominous and indicative that our marriage rates are going down, way, way, way down. Why is that? It's because young males have no aspiration of getting married, because marriage is a team and it threatens them. It discourages
good
them.
point.
Wow,
Yeah.
I
They're
never
not
thought
sure
of
how to
that.
operate. I mean, I go on campuses, major university campuses across the country, and I speak with fraternities. These are not Christian campuses. These are like, University of Cincinnati, University of Kentucky, others that they bring me in and speak to various folks. And I tell these guys, one of the things I tell these guys all the time, I say, look, you can have any woman on campus. All you have to do is talk to them, because everybody else your generation is intimidated to talk to an actual live flesh woman. They'll text them, they'll get in text threads with them, they'll go out in groups, but young males have lost confidence to talk to women and go on dates with them. It's almost like I long for the days as a pastor when I used to have to have sermons about don't have sex with your girlfriend, don't have sex with your boyfriend if you're not married. I don't have to give those anymore, because the statistics are clear. People aren't having sex like that. People are having sex with themselves. Sex has become a complete solo sport. The porn industry has taken off, and the masturbation industry with all kind of tools have come about. I mean, it's big business, and people are leveraging it. And young men are not learning and have not figured out how to have an actual relationship with somebody who has skin on, because we don't understand team.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow. Yeah.
It's a deep thought, just thinking through what you're saying and where we are at with the men in our lives. Misty, you go.
No, I was just gonna say, well, we've talked about how, men are like, it's worse now, but also if you look at the cultural expectations for men, those have changed significantly.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what are some of these
Right.
expectations? And also, is it impacting their ability to transition from being a boy into a man?
Gosh, this is really good, Missy. Great question. I feel like I'm in a safe place to answer this year, because there's a lot of places I could be. I probably could be strung up for what I'm going to say, but let's just keep the conversation going. Let's talk about this together.
Okay.
Okay. Again, this is back to current men facing things that are first in anthropological history. And some of these things are good expectations. It's just the first. Let's look at the history of men. What did the history of men do? It was the hunter and gatherer. We would go out, we would hunt, we would come back, we would provide, and the woman would keep the tent, keep the cabin, keep the teepee, whatever, gather some berries. And that was kind of the expectation of the roles. Woman would keep the house, and the man would kind of do his thing and come back and bring all the game. I think that obviously was missing a number of things. As men, we need to be emotionally present. As men, we do need to be relationally linked. Our kids do need dad involved, not just mom. Okay, all of that is critical. But if I look at today, what the average guy is supposed to do, I just get overwhelmed. Let's just talk about, and a lot of these could be for the women too. So let's just talk about the men. Okay, we're supposed to have a great career that's always growing. We're supposed to have an income that's always growing. We're supposed to be well-read. We're supposed to be also workout fiends. Like, we crack on dad bods. Like, it's one thing. We crack on men like a crazy way, like dad bods. Like, if you talk about mom bods, oh my gosh, you'd be cracked.
Don't do it.
Even the discussion about toxic masculinity. How often have I answered the question of toxic masculinity? Could you imagine what would happen if we said, let's talk about toxic femininity? Even putting toxic with femininity, you would get shot. You would get strung up. Yet we have this discussion all the time with a man. A man's supposed to work out. He's supposed to be well-read. He's supposed to be reading his Bible every day. He's supposed to be leading the family spiritually, which is a whole nother topic we can get on. And in the midst of all these things that are happening, he is now supposed to come home and not be worn out and be emotionally present and just be the perfect dad, the perfect emotional Kleenex for everybody in the house. And he's not supposed to take care of him. He's not supposed to have any hobbies. because that takes away from his family. I mean, I could go on and on. And these are things that we just can't do as modern males, and women can't either. But women had their moments back in the 70s or 80s when the women's movement stood up and said, stop. These ideals that Barbie is putting out, these cosmopolitan ideals of the woman who has it all, it's false. It doesn't work. And women just freaked out about it. We've kind of cranked down the expectations a little bit. But we haven't with men, and I think we're crumbling. Or we've just said, no, forget it. I'm not playing your game. I'm out. I'm tapping out. I'm not doing your marriage fantasy. I'm tapping out of the family thing. I can't do it. I'm done. And that's where we're seeing the statistics.
Mm. So, okay, let's shift to women. How do we fit into all this? You know, how can we be good wives and mothers and helping, you know, the boys transition to men?
Well, you're talking about for your children, or you're talking about for your husband?
Both. Let's tackle both.
She would rather your husband be a
I
man.
see what you did there, Brian.
Well, no, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about Misty's husband or his or kids. I know nothing about that. I'm sorry. They are two important discussions. I wasn't sure which one you wanted to have.
Let's delve into both a little bit.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
So with the kids, I would encourage your husband to be very present and recognize that there's a power to his words that's going to surpass yours. And I hate it. We all hate it as men. People don't go to counseling for what their mom said to them. They go to counseling for what their dad said to them.
Interesting.
People aren't crushed because their mom didn't affirm them. We're crushed because our dad didn't affirm us. And by the way, this sucks. I wish this wasn't the way. I'm not saying this is the way it should be. I'm just saying, I look at my life and people I counsel and people I interact, this is the way it is. There's a power to a man's presence and a man's voice. And you just got to encourage your husband to hang in there and give all that he has any way he can. I wish, man, if you want to get me crying, you'll get me crying by regrets about when I was a father for younger kids. I remember being with my young kids and I have an old lady come up to me in a very specific moment. She said, "Oh, enjoy it, because it'll be gone before you know it is." And I thought to myself, I hope so, because this sucks.
Oh,
this is just horrible. Yeah, it's hard work. It's hard work with little kids. I realize now my regrets are that I wasn't more emotionally and physically present for my kids. I did things I thought that I had to do. I really didn't have to do. I really missed out a lot of that stuff. So I would just say, and by the way, if you don't have a husband, if your kids do not have somebody in the house to fill that role, I would go in search of somebody and I would have a conversation with them, say, could you fill a father figure role for my kids? And they're going to say, they'll be very freaked out by that. And knows, well, what does that mean? So, all it means is like, could you spend some one-on-one time with one of my kids once a month? Could you like just take him out to breakfast? Could you send him a birthday card? Could you send her a text, about just some presence? You can get somebody to say, oh, this is going to be my ministry for a very minimal amount of time every month. I'm going to be a token father figure. And I do mean token, because you're not gonna be able to do much because all of us are slammed, but just something there. So that's what I would say, is to find a father figure for your kids. And if your kids have a father, man, just pour fuel in him the best way you can.
Real quick before we tackle wives and all of this,
Yes.
I will say this just occurred to me. Now, my dad was not part of my life. My parents divorced when I was a baby, and he was gone. I grew up with my grandfather as my father figure. However, there was, and he was wonderful, don't get me wrong, but there was a big, obviously, like I realized that he is not my father. And I look at my weird need to be independent, even now, having been, we're going to be celebrating 14 years this year. I have trouble being led.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
And I was just thinking about that as you were talking, because you said, it takes a long time to recover from what dad said, and also what dad didn't say or didn't demonstrate. Yeah.
Yeah, well, welcome to the club, sister. I'm the same way. My my dad is not, for a bunch of reasons, the nuclear engineer, old school male nuclear engineer, thinks with his brain, all that stuff. Hyper huge head, huge brain, troubleshot nuclear reactors. I mean, my dad is not. Dad has not done a lot of encouraging or affirming of me. That's one of the reasons I kept trying to prove myself as a man. And so to this day, I am very sensitive to criticism. I feel like everyone's out to get me. And when
Hmm.
someone compliments me, I soak it up because I'm still in recovery mode, just like you are. It's
Mhm.
just a different way.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh
I
boy, do I echo that. Raised by an electrical engineer, brainiac, leader of his college graduating class, and I don't know what 2 + 2 is. And so there are
Five.
some
It's five.
five. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. See, I'll believe it. There are just some big differences, and bless his heart. I love you, Dad, and I know he loves me now. But growing up, I just always felt like I couldn't do it right because there was a right way. And I concur with the immediate reaction. In fact, Kinkle Fritz and I have had this discussion about my reaction to correction or thoughts of how we could do things better, Sally. Um, it's just a knee jerk reaction to never feeling like I ever quite attained that. So I think that leads me to my point that so often our children may have come from us, but they are very, very different. And so is the case with our son and my husband. I think if there was anything, they're so very different. And yet, God placed them there. And I think that recognizing those differences and figuring out how we can better relate to each other would be a real core in attaining that turning point for our sons as they're growing into men. So, talk to us about that little push pull that happens. We're establishing between fathers and daughters and fathers and sons, but since sons are the point of today's, talk to us about those turning points and how do you get there and how do you know that you've crossed over?
Well, in a lot of ways, I don't think there's much difference between our daughters and our sons.
Mhm.
So I think it goes both ways here. There's this isn't obviously in the book. This is my personal parenting philosophy, and take it or leave it. You probably heard some iteration on it. But there's four distinct phases that a child goes through that a parent has to steward well. The phases are nurse, king/queen, coach, friend.
Hmm.
So when your kids are first born, you're just a nurse to them.
Mm-hmm.
You're wiping things, you're feeding things, you're carrying things, and they got nothing to offer. You're just a nurse, a selfless nurse, which I think is really important for our spiritual formation, which is another reason I'm concerned about men in the future. When you as a man, when you have not been forced to serve somebody, whether you like it or not, there's a certain level of development you will never achieve. A man who has never had a kid and he's never had to do stuff he doesn't want to do for 2 years straight, waking up in the middle of the night, and geez, I'm telling you, it stokes a selflessness gene in you. It makes you a different person that you won't be otherwise. And that's another dangerous thing. It's really, really dangerous that males are waiting longer to have kids, if they have kids at all, because they're going to be way more selfish than they would have been otherwise. So the first phase is nurse. The second phase is king/queen. This is when your kid learns to do things simply because you said so. Well, why? Because I said so. That's why. Because I know more than you. You don't know Jack, and you don't deserve to make any decisions. Because any decision you make right now is going to be horrible. You can't make a decision when to go to bed. You're never going to get the right amount of sleep. You can't make a decision of what you should eat. You're going to eat, Fruit Loops all day long. You can't make a decision. No, you know nothing. I know everything. I brought you in this world, and I can take you out. So you will do it. You will do it because I said it. That's a really critical thing for the kids' formation and actually for our long-term relationship with our child, because they learn at that point that I am an authority, just like, and by the way, God has these 4 stages with us as well. Okay, it's a whole nother sermon. But
Mm.
that king/queen. Then the next phase is a coach. And a lot of parents drop the ball in the handoff. They're a great nurse, but they can never become an authority.
Mm.
They're a great authority, but they never then shift to giving away decision-making responsibility and giving the person a level of autonomy. That's the coach level. Well, what do you think? What do you think? Well, maybe you should be choosing if you're going to go to college or not. You should be choosing what college you go to if you go to college. We're coaching them.
Yep.
And coaching them like, here's what you should be looking for in a spouse. We've set that up, but we can't be like choosing their kid's spouse for them or crushing them or criticizing them if they bring somebody home that we don't necessarily like. Well, maybe coach them like, this person isn't a believer. How's that working for you? Are you okay married to an unbeliever? Are you saying that you don't follow Christ anymore? What we can have those kind of coaching conversations, but the coach thing. And then final phase is where you ultimately want to get to, where I am with all my 3 kids. It's when you're a friend. Your friend. And that's what Jesus is. He says, I no longer call you servants, because a servant doesn't know his master's business. All that I have learned from the Father I made known to you. I call you friend. God wants us to be his friend. And if we have been under his authority, we can handle that. If we haven't gone through a strict authority place, or we do it just because God says so, just because the Bible says so, I say so, we're never going to be his friend, because that hasn't been settled. But those 4 things are things that are equally applied to mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. But men, I think we need to sort of re-up our commitment to those kind of truths.
That's good.
Amen.
We're talking with Brian Tome. The book is The 5 Marks of Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. Can you provide some insights into the ancient primal path to manhood that you talk about in the book?
Well, yeah, the ancient primal path is, there were things in all ancient cultures that you would do that meant that you were a man. And so the Bible culture is one of those ancient cultures in the past. But there's always like a thing that you did, or people would just declare that you are a man. In biblical times, excuse me, and actually in all ancient cultures, the default one, and this is going to be really counterculture, or maybe make you a bit squeamish, but just hang in here on it, was ejaculation. Because when you could ejaculate, you could have your own family, and you were expected to have your own family, and you were expected to be a man, because now you're on a different level. Now contrast that. I mean, even the term adolescence, until about 1900, the term adolescence wasn't even invented. And adolescence was meant to be this really awkward years after you first had your first ejaculation, or you could ejaculate. Like, this person's confused, they don't know what's going on. Now look at what adolescence is. It's like from 13 to 29 or 28, where we just expect young males to not have figured it out and to go find themselves, to be on this endless path of self-discovery, instead of, no, this is my course in life. I can create, I can add value, I can go. So ejaculation was, through human history, it was the one that said something is different and you're ready to go into a new phase. But there's other ones that other cultures did. Like, I met a guy a few years ago, when I was talking about this, came up to me, first generation immigrant from Africa. And he said, yeah, we had that in our culture. I said, what was it? He said, well, when I was a boy, all of the men in the village came to my house, and they knocked on the door, and my mother came, and she knew exactly what was happening, and she kept me from going out. She kept me behind her, and all the men in the village said, come on, time for you to come out and be a man. We need to take you out and bring you into manhood. And if he doesn't come out from behind his mother, they leave him for a whole year, and they come back the next year, and they do the same thing. And if she is keeping her little son behind him and protecting him, at this point in the culture of the tribe, they come in and overpower her, and they take the son, they take him away from her, and they take him up in the hills, and they do a number of initiation and stuff. And when he comes back with a basket full of eggs because he's now a man and he's expected to provide for his mother and to protect her. And so he comes back with something to actually add value, because now he's adding value to the family instead of just taking. He said, that was mine. There's taking an eagle's feather, there's climbing a peak. It doesn't matter what it is, so long as your son knows that when I say you're a man, we're going to do this thing. It could be literally we're going to go to a specific park and lick a raspberry lollipop. And I do mean that. People laugh at that, but no, really, no. It's so long as they know this event means that you say I'm worthy and you say I'm a man, whatever that event is. And I think there's some really creative things you can do with it, but that's a key thing for your young boys, your young males. Let them know this is coming. And then when you do that, then you have to treat them like a man. Like, so for my son, we took a motorcycle trip. And people say, well, isn't that dangerous? I said, yes, that's actually the whole point. Yes, it was dangerous. The 16-year-old on a motorcycle, it's very dangerous. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell him I'm going to confer trust on you. And then I took some friends out who he respected, who were basically father figures to him, people in his student ministry, people he knew, about 5 of us. When it came into the final night for us to bring him into manhood, where we actually gave him words of affirmation, said he was a man. I mean, one of only 2 times in his life, he wept in my presence. He's 30 years old now. When he came back, I had to treat him like a man. He was still 16 in the house, or 17 in the house. He still had a year or 2 of high school left. And that meant that I couldn't have any not curriculum, curfew for him. No, because if there was a man who was staying in my house, there were some rules of the house you have to abide by because you're in my house, but not curfew. Curfew wouldn't be one of them. It meant that he didn't have to ask to take the car or take the motorcycle anymore. Like, unless I need it, he would do that. I had to treat him like a man. I see a lot of us are not willing to treat our young males as men, even when they are men. We would still rather that they would be under our coaching, that we'd rather queen them and king them. No, let them be a man. You got to let them go at some point. Some people do everything right, and instead of that, they don't let them go.
Well, that's an interesting thought. Are we treating our kids like boys and girls when they've graduated? Meaning,
right.
Not graduated school, but graduated, they really should be treated differently.
Right.
Well, and what's the level of our expectations for our kids?
Yeah.
All of Jesus' disciples, other than Peter, were under age 18. And that's, I don't know.
I guess I didn't realize that.
I didn't think about that.
No.
Of course you didn't think that, because that's not what is depicted in our movies.
Right.
How do I know that? Because when Jesus does one of his miracles, it's the coin in the mouth of the fish that Peter gets. And what's the coin for? The coin was to pay the temple tax.
Right.
Only Jesus at age 30-ish and Peter, who was at some point over 18, were due to pay the temple tax. He says that's for you and I. All the rest of them didn't have to pay the temple tax because they were too young. They were under 18 and under. So think about that. Jesus starts the greatest movement to start the world, and he believes that 16-year-olds can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who's the last 16-year-old that was ever on a board of a local church? Who's the last 30-year-old? Who's the last 30-year-old that was a board member of a local church?
Mm-hmm.
These were elder material, and that's why the qualifications for elders aren't age, it's characteristics, it's qualities. But yet us, in our world, we just think of people who are under 18 as less thans, not able.
True.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You talk about the concept of the Peter Pan boyhood lifestyle. You alluded to it earlier too, where just there's a lack of responsibility, and you're in it to buy what you want and do what you want and have fun, and it's kind of this reluctance to grow up, and it's negatively impacting our guys. How can they recognize if they're in this pattern, if they're in this cycle, and what steps do they start to take to break away from it once they realize it?
Yeah, great question, Misty. Thank you. I think that, well, to recap Peter Pan, because I didn't really even see this point of Peter Pan until I was about 30. And I was like, oh, wow. Like I just always thought of Peter Pan as just a guy who wants to have fun and enjoy life. And then when I looked at the overtones of the movie, or someone told me what it was, I was like, oh, geez, that went right over my head. And Peter Pan is just, he wants to be a boy. He wants no responsibility. He wants to just flutter around. That's what he wants. And that's what our young males want. And they're being told and glorified lack of responsibility is what you should have. Take care of yourself. And now I forgot your question. I just started going off on a rant.
No,
What was your question, Misty?
How would a man recognize they're in this cycle? Maybe they didn't even realize it. Like
right.
some
Right.
markers, and then how on earth do they get away from it?
Okay, so I think the 5 marks of a man do it. Those are the marks of whether or not you're cycle. But I'll give you another one on the Peter Pan. If there was a 6th mark, basically all these 5 marks say this, but this is just different nomenclature. What Peter Pan doesn't do is he doesn't create any excess value for anybody else. He's all about himself, and actually he's threatened when somebody is going beyond the next level. Men create excess value that benefit others. Men, because of our lives, when we're a man, and again, some of this is woman stuff too. Same thing with a woman, right? We're living in such a way that other people are thankful that we're alive, because we've added real value to them. We've given them counsel. We've given them help. We've created structures that are blessing other people. And that's how I think that's it right there. What is the weight of your life? Are you creating things that are causing people to circle around you, or what's been known as gravitas? Gravitas is that weight of your character, that weight of your identity. And the weightiest things has moons orbiting around it. The weightiest people, the people of the deepest character, have people who are in their orbit. They want to be around them, not because the person needs people circling around them, but because just by their mass and their content of their character and their weighty relationship with walking with the living God, other people want to be around them. They're constantly circling them because there's something there. If you don't have that as a man, I'd say it's probably because if you're not a boy, you at least have too many boyish tendencies that are keeping you from the weightiness that you could have.
That's good.
That is good.
Wow. I just think about my husband and how he has cultivated relationships with other men, and how much I need to appreciate that. I think I have, but you're really waking me up to that.
Oh, Sally, you're a good woman, Sally. You're a good woman. You're a good woman.
I admire
This is
him.
another whole topic we get into. Why is the suicide epidemic so high?
Yeah.
It's so high because of male loneliness. The social structures, I'm going to get to affirming you in a moment. It's just background before I give you the big affirmation. The social structures, the social connective tissues that we used to have for men are all gone. Softball leagues gone, bowling leagues gone, Elks gone. All these things that our dads maybe did, they're all gone. Going to the local YMCA, like YMCA is just for people who want to work out now, right? Things that you would interact, Young Men's Christian Association, like getting the men together and doing these things. As all those things have been torn apart, the average man doesn't have any friends. If you ask him who his friends are, he's going to say 1 or 2 people. The average guy, he's going to say 1, the people he works with. He's going to name somebody there. No, that's just the person you spend a lot of time with. That's not necessarily a friend. Or 2, he'll mention somebody maybe he had in college, a real deep friendship. Most men are not. They don't have friends. And women, Sally, I believe, intuitively understand when their husband is isolated, they are actually more vulnerable. So you're very smart to encourage your husband to have friends, because I meet some women who don't understand, if you allow your husband to spend some money on a hobby that brings friends around, it's going to be good for you. You're going to be protected, because if he has genuine friends, they're going to say things to him that he doesn't want to hear because it's in your family's best interest. But he's not going to hear that unless he's got genuine friendships. Women connect with people, men connect with things. When men connect with things, They need other people to help them with that thing, and that's how friendships start. Most men don't have a hobby, and therefore they don't have friends, and therefore the women in their life are actually at risk.
Wow. Wow. Well, so let's talk to the men who are listening to this and thinking, oh man, I've got the lone wolf syndrome going. How in the world do they begin to break out? And as women, how can we help to facilitate that?
Well, here again, let's look at the etymology of our culture. Let's look at the language of our culture. We affirm lone wolves. I hear
Mhm.
men say, "Well, I'm sort of more of a lone wolf." And
Yeah.
what I say in response to that is, I said, "Oh, you mean you're small and weak and you're going to die early?"
Oh.
I never thought of it that way.
Right, because
Yes.
I interacted. I went to a guy who trains wolves in Wyoming. I spent a day with him, and that's what he
Uh-huh.
told me. He learned me. He said, "Look, the wolves need a pack.
Yep.
They need a pack to bring down an elk, or they don't eat. So a lone wolf is going to not eat as well. He's going to be smaller, and he's going to die. And that's what's happening with his men. We actually think it's a cool thing. I call myself a lone wolf. No, it's not a cool thing. It's very sad. It's not good. And it's ties into the anthropological truth that men and women need friendships.
Mhm.
And we don't have friendship, things aren't going to go well.
You've got something, Brian, called Man Camp, which I
Yeah.
want to go.
Yes.
Sounds great.
I would love that. I'd love for you to go.
And over 20,000 men have been there and participated. Explain the philosophy behind what's going on. And you said there's some life transformations that happen there as well.
Mm.
Oh, there's huge transformations. I and some close friends of mine started having a real heart for men who were disconnected and lonely and not doing well. And we realized that our hobby at that time was riding motorcycles and camping. And we had some really every time we have significant discussions around the fire. A lot of stupid laughing and humor and all that stuff. That always happens. But invariably, somebody would open up about a challenge they had, a struggle they had, a thing that they were faced, insecurity. It happens all the time. And we said, how can we make these fire conversations happen? Talk about things that, have happened all men forever that don't happen now. It's staring into a fire and talking.
Mm.
Like when men stare into fire, which we've done all over the place for all of human history, I don't know, it's like having a beer in your hand, staring into fire, having a beer in your hand. It's a social buffer. And we talk. And so we said, how can we get men to sit around a campfire and talk? And Man Camp was born from that. So it's a weekend of things that challenge men, to push men. It's camping, it's hiking your gear in, it's worshiping in a tent. Last one was 2,500 guys from 41 states and 4 countries that came in just for that event, singing their guts out. And man, I'll tell you, if you never heard 2,500 guys sing, it would be like you would have heard on the battlefield in in the Civil War or one of the Scottish wars. It's powerful. And we have a prayer tent that's right next to a beer truck. We went through last Man Camp. We went through 90 kegs of beer, and it's not that everybody has to drink, but I'll tell you what: if you're going to have a church camp and you're not going to have alcohol, you're not going to have the average guy. And so we give a big thing of, hey, a lot of you in recovery, we honor you. You don't have to be a man to drink, but hey, man, if you want to have a couple beers around the fire, we're here for you on that. We put that beer tent right beside the prayer tent, which is old school charismatic Pentecostal prayer.
Mm.
Wow.
And at the beginning of the week, the lines for the beer tent are long, and we intentionally put it there so they're right beside the prayer tent. And then the last night, there's nobody at the beer truck waiting in line, but the line is to get into the prayer tent. And we've had legitimate physical healings take place in a bunch of them. We've had I can't talk about this much from other places, but since this is a Christian podcast or a Christian radio show, excuse me, last time we had the gift of tongues literally come out in the prayer tent.
Wow.
We had people came up from Brazil, spoke Portuguese, nobody could. So we had a guy came in and was praying for them, and he decided to break into what he knows as tongues, which is a thing that I've never done. I've never had the private prayer language thing. I've never had that. This guy has that, and he broke out in it, which is not a language. But if you read Acts 2, when Pentecost breaks out and there's tongues, you're really uncertain. Is this people speaking Spanish when they never formally learned Spanish, or is this people hearing in Spanish even though Spanish isn't being spoken? Well, in this situation, these guys heard Portuguese even though he wasn't speaking in Portuguese.
Wow.
And they were dumbfounded. And there was a translator there who could translate both. One of their friends, one of the four friends, and he said, "You weren't speaking Portuguese. I don't know what you're speaking, but all of us understood exactly what you said, and here's what you said."
Wow.
We have those kind of things happening regularly. It's this mashup of men acting like junior high boys, and I use that positively speaking, just stupid humor, stupid obstacle courses, mashed in with intense worship, mashed in with helpful teaching, matched in with games and chopping wood, mashed in with beer, mashed in with prayer. This whole concoction comes together, and it's been pretty darn profound. It's a movement that's actually growing exponentially.
Wow. Sounds amazing.
Well, you ought to come then.
Yeah,
At least
right.
your co-host can't come, but you can come. We'd love to have you. Just go to mancamp.us. Mancamp.us.
I think I might be coming.
There you go.
That'd be so good for you. Yes.
So, okay, real quick, the absence of real men in today's culture, we've gone over that, and you've talked a little bit about the cost of it, to our families and to our society.
Yes.
Steps that we can take, like immediate things that we can work towards to move this forward in the right direction.
Man, there's so many things, Misty. I'll just give you two things. I'll give you a lot more, but two things for whatever reason just pops in my mind. One is if you're a woman who's married to a husband and your husband is a believer and he goes to church with you, back off of telling him to be the spiritual leader in the house. I can't tell you how many men I've talked to who feel emasculated when their wife tells them to be the spiritual leader in the house. And I always say, what does that mean? Because I agree with that. You should be a spiritual leader. I agree with that. But what invariably happens is they're expecting the husband to lead Bible studies every week with the kids in the home. And I'm pretty good at Bible. I'm pretty good at Bible. I have a degree in it. I've read the Bible a lot for over my 40 years of following Christ. I'm pretty good at it. I've only led my family in a Bible study twice because both times kids ended up crying because I sucked at it. I don't know what it was. The rails always came off. So I just said, you know what? I'm giving up on this family devotions thing. Other people do it great, but my kids would tell I've impacted them definitely biblically, and I have those conversations with them. I think sometimes as I see a lot of women putting a template on what they think a spiritual leader is on your man, and really what you're doing is you're giving him another responsibility and he can't do anymore. He's already maxed out. So try to encourage your husband with what he's doing instead of continuing to say, be the spiritual leader at home, be the spiritual leader at home, be the spiritual. It doesn't help. I've never met a man who's ever heard his wife say, be a spiritual leader at home, and him go, oh, really? Okay. And then he just changes behavior and she's happy. It never happens. And never. So just lower your expectations, try to encourage him, and maybe he'll raise the bar without that. The second thing that comes to my mind, this is just really a total apples and oranges, totally different. If you're a parent and you've got a young boy and he's in your family and he hasn't started kindergarten yet, delay him. Have him start first grade late. Start him late. The science is pretty clear on this, that women's brains, girls' brains develop faster than men's brains, than boys' brains, excuse me. And so what happens is little Johnny just starts falling behind and he feels like a loser and he just gives up on school. And I think that's what's going on with the 70% in grad school. If you pause your your young boy a year, which I know is going to be hard and awful, because then you got another year staying home with them or another year of daycare, whatever your situation is. But if you pause them for a year, the data is really, really clear that he won't feel left out. He will be encouraged in his studies, which will greatly bless the next few decades of his life.
That's good. We did that with our son, and he turned up being a real smarty pants and then just tested ahead in a couple of grades anyway. So,
yeah, well, if that happens, that's wonderful. Yeah. That's great.
No kidding. Wow.
That was actually part of my story for why I was 7 years going through college. Is I met a wall in 4th grade with a teacher who just had it in for, what we found later, had it in for little boys. Just didn't understand us. And I just lost all academic confidence, and it just derailed me. And then you add on to that, we used to do things when I was growing up that we don't do even in schools anymore. Like there was recess. You had 2 blocks of recess. Yep. We used to go out and run and play kickball. And actually, that was back in the day. You could actually play what was called murder ball. You could play murder ball on the playground, which is basically dodgeball. And then we would come in and we'd have mud caked in the bottom of our shoes, and we traipsed mud inside. And of course, some of the teachers were like, "Hey, take your shoes off," or something like that. But the school made accommodation for, we're going to allow these boys to play and blow off some steam so maybe they can focus, and we're going to deal with muddy floors.
Yep.
Man, that stuff is not happening in schools today. Absolutely not. You want these little kids who are spazzes, which I was the spaz, to just toe the line and sit there nice and still and learn? Man, it's a recipe for discouragement.
Brian Tome, 5 Marks a Man, Finding Your Path to Courageous Manhood. Thank you, sir. This has been really good stuff. And there's a workbook, too, that goes along with this, correct?
Yes, there's a workbook that comes along with it. It's your different kind of workbook. It's not the kind of thing that a guy does on his own and just fills it out in his own time, personal, quiet time with God. It includes getting the book dirty, it includes going out and doing things, includes things like throwing the book at things. I mean, if you use the thing the way I intended when it was written, it should be tattered and gross and dirty and all that, because it's meant to get into life, just a man who's going after God needs to get into life.
Sounds like this. Is this something I should go over with my son?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
A lot of guys are using it with their sons. Yes.
That's great. Okay, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for your time. Good stuff. Excellent.
Thank you for the opportunity to talk about this, and your great questions and your challenging insights. Really, really good, guys. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.